is some themes, some broad stuff that you're telling your customers?
So I think there's a lot of interest in defense and intelligence applications of satellites, and in particular the type of RF type of technology that we have. Naturally, this comes out of the current geopolitical situation. You have a lot of stuff going on in the United States right now. And at the same time, really since February, you've had rest of world governments looking at increasing their defense budgets, having less expectation of reliance on the United States to defend them in terms of crisis. So there's a lot of interest in how the rest of the world can develop their capabilities.
Do you have customers around the world, or is it domestic U.S.?
We do. We have customers around the world.
Is the U.S. government a customer?
The U.S. government is also a customer.
Are they the big one, the lion's share, or are you guys pretty diversified?
We're actually quite diversified, both between commercial company customers as well as a government, and that can be civil agencies who buy our weather atmospheric data sets, and it can also be defense and intelligence, and that's U.S. and rest of world. So it's pretty well diversified.
Well, we've had companies ranging from McDonald's to, I don't know what, say AI is revolutionizing their business. How is AI impacting the satellite business?
So AI is also an important term and topic in the satellite sector. There's a couple of areas where we find it interesting. The first is in weather forecasting, where we're doing AI-based weather forecasting, specifically when we talk about sub-seasonal forecasts, so going 30, 45 days in the future, where normal forecasting models aren't usually very good. The other areas, or when it comes to satellites, are the processing of data and the ability to use AI to process them automatically and on orbit, so you don't have to download all the data sets, as well as in the operations of the constellation overall, because if you have many, many satellites in orbit in various orbital planes with lots of different sensors on them, having AI ability to manage that network is something quite interesting.
Sorry. I was going to say, you also had a contract with Space Force, right? Did I read that right?
Yeah, there is one that was just recently announced.
Space Force contract. How cool is that?
I know.
So how easy is it to come to deals with contracts? I would think that your services are highly needed right now as companies are trying to figure out where to build stuff, for example, or how to allocate their supply chains.
So I think demand is very strong right now for both satellite data sets as it relates to climate or to better understanding increased weather variability. And there is also increasing demand, what I mentioned, on the defense and then intelligence side, and in particular, as more and more countries look to how they build out their own sovereign capabilities. Yep. And this is where we have the strength in building, both in Europe as well as in the United States.
Teresa, thank you for coming in. Really appreciate getting a few minutes of your time. Teresa Condor, CEO of Spire Global. It is a publicly traded company, SPIR. We appreciate Teresa coming into our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Looking at the markets here, we got the S&P up 25 points, the Dow up 133, NASDAQ up 136. That's 0.7%. We're starting to build a little momentum in the markets. 10-year Treasury yields up a little bit as well, 4.38%. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
All right, let's listen to I think it's a podcast that Bloomberg did 2 hours ago, talking about can Canada emerge as an energy superpower?
Your company's workflow.
The Canadian government has big ambitions to make this country a global energy superpower. It was one of the key themes highlighted in a meeting this week between Prime Minister Mark Carney and the country's premiers. But what's it actually going to take to get us to that point? And does this initiative create potential investment opportunities? Joining us to break it all down is Hussein Aladina. He is Managing Director and Head of Commodities at TD Asset Management. How are you?
I'm great. Excited.
Two parts I want to talk about, I think more is Canada and the global energy superpower, and then just the idea of how much energy is going to be needed as we move ahead. So these are the my two questions over the next little while. At a high level, what does it mean for Canada to become, assuming it's not, a global energy superpower? What does it take? What's in the way?
So we're the fourth largest crude producer globally. So I'd say we are a superpower. But I think that we've likely been punching below our weight, right? We've been blessed, not just in energy, but from a commodity perspective, we've been endowed with a tremendous amount of resource. And I think we've neglected the development of that resource for different reasons over the course of the last decade. I think Prime Minister Carney's refreshing take on it is welcome. We're going to need, I think we're going to need the energy, we're going to need the commodities. So I think there will be a market for it. But it does take time, and we've talked about this before, like the reason a commodity cycle exists is because it takes time for supply to respond. So even with the best of intentions, which I think the Prime Minister has and the Energy Minister now has, it takes time to build out.
Can we just elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think it's interesting for people to know, because we hear, I know TD Economics came out, this wasn't pipelines, but they said I think it was 18 years to bring a mine online in Canada. But when you were chatting earlier, saying even if we had all the approvals, everything we needed to get done and just started, takes 2 to 3 years to build a pipeline.
So let's just take an example of TMX, which came on last year. That project took 11 years from sort of idea to the first sort of commercial use. Northern Gateway took 14 years, 12 years before it was canceled. Right. So there is a process that we have to move through. And I imagine that the federal and provincial government, if there is appetite, can expedite that. But there are physical challenges, physical constraints associated with laying pipe or building upstream, downstream production. And that stuff takes time. 2 to 3 years is probably very optimistic. 11 years might be on the long end of things, but can we get pipelines and infrastructure built in 5 to 7 years? I think so, if there is appetite to do that.
How does that, as someone who watches commodity prices, how does that affect how you look at things? I mean, it's material. I assume at some level later on. But how are you thinking about it?
So I'm excited about it as a Canadian because I think it's phenomenal for Canada's potential GDP, what it means for the dollar, what it means for GDP per capita. It doesn't make me any less bearish commodities near term because it takes so long to bring this production to market if things go well. Generally speaking, I'd say, and I'm sure we'll talk about the oil market later, but like the focus of market participants, broadly speaking, is the next 6 to 12 months, maybe 18 months. Are there folks trading oil 5 years forward? Yes, but not meaningfully. And again, I think even 5 years forward is probably the earliest where we see kind of the supply demand impact of policy changes which are happening today.
Is it, and so when you are building pipelines and making the plans in terms of, what the paybacks are and revenues, you have to look at oil prices 5 years out, not 6 months out, to your point, and you see transitions happening with, LNG, nuclear. I think Meta just signed a deal with a 20-year deal. So how do you, what do you longer term see for the demand for oil?
So I think there's two things there. So on the long term, the demand for oil is going to be highly, highly correlated and a function of GDP growth first and foremost, and then your alternatives. Today, whether we like it or not, oil is still one of the cheapest forms of energy. It's the most available, it's secure, it's easy to move. And I don't see demand, we've talked about this for years, I don't see demand for oil peaking the way that some have argued will happen before 2030. I think oil demand continues to grow if the economy continues to move. On the price level that is discounted when you're thinking about the DCF of a company or the economics of a pipeline, oftentimes the forward curve will be used. So we'll look at the forward curve and use that as kind of the expected price. But the forward curve is not a predictor of future price. So we use it, or analysts will use it. But ultimately, if you take the forward curve, or if you look at the forward curve, you have this sort of misguided idea that oil prices are decreasing in the future. The weakness in forward prices will discourage investment, all else equal, which makes it all the harder.
And what about if I just say power? If I kind of bring, oil is one way of powering the economy, but the demand for power overall for the next little while is you just see up and to the right is how or is it?
Yeah, no, I think it is. So globally, demand for power will grow with GDP. So as an economy industrializes, their power demand increases.
But AI and...
But if you look in the developed market, so in the US, for example, power demand for the better part of 20 years was flat to down because we were exporting our manufacturing, our power demand elsewhere. Today, if we look at power demand in the US over the course of the last 12, 16 months, for the first time, it's been increasing. It's been increasing because, as you said, ChatGPT or AI-related demand, as well as energy transition on the margin, you're seeing substitution out of ICE vehicles into EV vehicles. I think the outlook for power is quite constructive globally and locally because of the growth in the economy together with this, what seems like insatiable demand from AI.
Bring it back to Canada. LNG, of course, is something that that we're focused on here as well too. And I think the first exports from Kitimat are getting closer.
Yeah.
But Canada are we not like a later player on the LNG stage?
Yeah. So globally, like your largest LNG suppliers are the US and Qatar, and it does take time to build liquefaction capacity. And we're definitely behind the ball. But again, if we look at the world and we anticipate that GDP is going to continue to increase, power demand is going to continue to increase. A lot of that power today is met with coal. Part of the reason that power is met with coal is because China, India, et cetera, have coal, and security of supply has become an issue in the last couple of years.
Growing your business shouldn't mean growing your overhead. Growth should be seamless with AI-driven workflows built.
I think that Canada should develop and continue to develop their LNG. We should try to do it quicker than we have been doing it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we're going to need to grow power supply. Nuclear will fill part of that gap, but you're talking about a 10-year window where you're not going to have meaningful nuclear additions. Natural gas can fill that void. And even post, when we have that nuclear running potentially, you're still going to need gas.
Yeah.
If you're a China or an India, today you're importing from Qatar. It's a relatively long route, or you're importing from the US. It's not clear that the US is always going to be there to export to you. So Canada can play a role in diversifying the supply chain for Asia.
Yeah.
And geographically, we happen to be well situated.
I want to bring it back more into current times. And, we have some horrible fires that are taking place actually right across the country, but specifically we're seeing a lot in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And we're seeing a shutdown of a lot of production, oil production. Is that material to the oil market?
So horrible situation.
Yeah.
Right now there's about 300 to 400,000 barrels a day of oil shut in. That's largely, I believe, Cenovus, MEG, and the Christina Lake project, I believe. Those are not trivial volumes, right? So the market, maybe to contrast, the market was quite concerned about the incremental barrels that OPEC was adding to the market.
Right.
They added 414,000 barrels a day, just for some perspective, in May, June, and July. If we lose this 400,000 barrels a day for a period of time, that offsets that. The quality of the oil is also very important.
Right.
So Canada produces a medium heavy barrel. A lot of the production growth that we've seen globally of late, which has come out of the US shale, has been a light sweet barrel. You need those medium barrels to mix with the light barrels to put into the refinery to make the gasoline and diesel that we consume. Before I came down, actually, it looks like there's some rain in the forecast, which is going to provide some reprieve and might lend to some production returning to market. Hopefully that production doesn't stay offline for a meaningful amount of time, but barrels lost are barrels lost.
Yeah. What is your short-term look on oil right now? Let's just say in the next, 3 months, 6 months, given OPEC and what's happening elsewhere.
So it's been hard, and we've talked before about kind of this disconnect in sort of supply demand fundamentals, inventories, and price.
Yeah.
For the better part, I would say, Kim, for the last 16 months, the market has been anticipating, consensus has been anticipating these meaningful builds in inventories, and that's got the market, despite the robust near-term fundamentals, has got the market relatively bearish. We haven't seen those builds. If we look at the first half of this year, inventories have built, but not meaningfully more than normal, and definitely not as much as the market expected. On paper, when we look at balances through the end of the year, we're supposed to see sizable builds by the end of the year. In the fourth quarter, we might see 2 million barrels a day of builds, which would be meaningful. My caveat is that we've been expecting these builds for a very long time, and they haven't materialized.
And if the build's not materialized because of the supply has been lower, the demand, which side?
So a couple of weeks ago, the IEA came out, not to get too technical, but in the oil balance, you have your supply, your demand, and that should equal the change in inventory.
Right.
There's a line item on the balance that's called miscellaneous to balance, which is the plug.
Always bad things come from miscellaneous to balance everywhere.
So they came back out 2 weeks ago. They came out and they said, by the way, demand in 2022, 2023, 2024 was higher than we thought. So they put it into demand. I think we have to be very mindful that we're talking about a market, Kim, that's 105 million barrels a day. And when we talk about the margin, right, the surplus or the deficit, we're talking about 500,000 barrels a day, 1 million barrels a day. So we're applying a lot of precision, but in reality, it's 105 million barrel per day market. And we don't have complete transparency on inventories globally.
Right.
Today at $65 a barrel, I'm less bullish than I was 2 weeks ago in the 50s. I think on paper, there is more upside risk in the near term because of geopolitics and the potential supply disruptions that stem from that. But I'm definitely concerned that, you know, growth slows and what that means ultimately for balances later this year. I'm not in the $40, $50 camp, but I'm also not in the 80, 90 camp unless we have some sort of supply related disruption.
What are you watching when you, when you're watching, when you talk about, there's a lot of things to pull on there. So from a geopolitical standpoint, what's going to move markets? And then also from a demand standpoint, because as we all kind of just wait and see what does trade look like really when deals happen, don't happen, whatever, everything. We're all tired of it. But.
So on geopolitics, I would say that 2 months ago, consensus was very much, hey, Trump is going to forge a deal between Russia, Ukraine, and there's going to be something positive that happens with Iran in the Middle East. Both of those things look far less likely today.
Ukraine's special forces has a lot to do with what happened lately.
And Iran has been very clear that, you know, the red line for them is that we're going to continue to enrich. The red line for the U.S. is that, no, you're not. So I'm not sure how that plays out. And I imagine there's some political gamesmanship taking place, but the likelihood that Iranian barrels are going to return in mass to the market, as some people are expecting, I think is lower probability than maybe what some folks thought a couple months ago. So there's a lot of production at risk. We haven't talked about Libya, which is also having issues right now, in addition to the challenges in Canada with the wildfires. A lot of supply at risk and very tight balances. Now, I don't know how bearish I can get on this idea that, hey, demand is going to fall apart later this year and I'm going to get phenomenal supply growth. The weakness in price that we've seen over the course of the last several weeks has already led to a reduction in the number of rigs drilling for oil in the Permian Basin. If you look at frac crews, the number of folks that are out there working, that number has fallen off meaningfully as well. So I think we have to remember that the market has, I think, a tendency of maybe being more bearish on demand than we should be. And we definitely are, at least over the course of the last 10 years, have been far more optimistic on the supply outlook than what's been realized. So I kind of keep that in the back of my mind when I'm looking at the market. The here and now, crude is backwardated, right?
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Jake from State Farm, everybody.
Ask your provider for Cologuard.
So refiners are paying a premium. I'm paying $1 premium to have crude in July versus waiting till August.
Right.
That's meaningful. And refinery margins, right? What the refiner gets paid to refine that crude that they're paying premium for today are sitting at 14, 15-month highs. So there's no indication on the refinery side that there is this capitulation in demand that we're worried about. That's what we're looking at today.
Fascinating. Give me 20 seconds on gold.
All right. Before we go to Trump's Oval Office question and answer session here with the German Chancellor, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. This is a dual purpose product. This is going to help boost up that immune system, and it also helps with your cardiovascular system. Olive leaf extract brings down inflammation, and it also helps to improve your lipid profile, helps to bring down LDL, and helps to increase HDL. If you have less LDL, then you have less plaque formation, because less LDL means less oxidized LDL. And oxidized LDL is the starting point to actually building up plaque. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. This stacks really well with the omega-3. So please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. It stacks well also with turmeric and ashwagandha.
But no, I think we have everything. I think we're in very good shape with China and the trade deal. We have a deal with China, as you know, but we were straightening out some of the points, having to do mostly with rare earth, magnets, and some other things.
So those reduced trade tariff rates, they remain in effect?
Yeah, we have the deal. I mean, we've had a deal. We announced the deal, and we'll be, I guess you could say, I wouldn't even say finalizing it up, Scott. I would say we have a deal, and we're going to just make sure that everybody understands what the deal is. Okay. We had a really good conversation. By the way, he invited me to China, and I invited him here. We both accepted. So I'll be going there with the First Lady at a certain point, and he'll be coming here hopefully with the First Lady of China.
Mr. President, what do you expect from Germany? Did you talk about the Chinese students? Are you allowing them to come to the US?
You know, Chinese students are coming. No problem. No problem.
Okay,
It's our honor to have them, frankly. Look, we want to have foreign students, but we want them to be checked. You know, in the case of Harvard and Columbia and others, all we want to do is see their list. There's no problem with that. This is anybody outside of our country, international students. Because when we see some of the people that we've been watching, we say, where do these people come from? How is that possible? No, we want to have foreign students come. We're very honored by it, but we want to see their list. Harvard didn't want to give us the list. They're going to be giving us the list now. I think they're starting to behave, actually, if you want to know the truth.
Okay.
On Russia, are you willing to put more pressure on Putin to end the war by imposing new sanctions on Russia and also on China?
Well, remember, I'm the one that ended Nord Stream 2, going to a place called Germany, come to think of it. I'm sorry I did that. I don't know. But I ended Nord Stream 2. Nobody else did. And then when Biden came in, he immediately approved it. That's the largest, essentially the largest pipeline in the world, going to Germany and other countries. And by the way, we have so much oil and gas, you will not be able to buy it all. I mean, you literally, we have so much, and I hope we're going to make that a part of our trade deal because we have more than anybody else. We have actually the most by far in the world, probably double what anyone else has. So we'll work on that. I'm sure that's something we'll discuss today.
Mr. President,
what do you expect from Germany and what do you expect from the Chancellor?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to meet because I've been dealing with the Chancellor and he's very, a very good man to deal with. He's difficult, I would say. Can I say that? It's a positive.
Go ahead.
You wouldn't want me to say you're easy, right? Yeah, he's a very great representative of Germany. I think all we want is just going to have a good relationship. The rest will just sort of follow very easily. We'll have a good trade deal. I mean, I guess that will be mostly determined by the European Union, but you're a very big part of that, so you'll be involved. But we'll end up hopefully with a trade deal or we'll do something, you know, we'll do the tariffs. I mean, I'm okay with the tariffs or we make a deal with the trade, and I guess that's what we're discussing now.
Mr. President,
Mr. President, okay.
Is Germany doing enough on defense, Mr. President? Is Germany doing enough on defense?
What?
Defense spending.
is Germany doing enough on defense?
The Chancellor wants to.
Is Germany doing
The
enough on
Chancellor wants to
defense?
spend 3.5.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't discussed it very much. I know that you're spending more money on defense now and quite a bit more money. And that's a positive thing. I'm not sure that General MacArthur would have said it's positive, you know. He wouldn't like it, but I sort of think it's good. You understand what I mean by that?
I understand.
He made a statement, never let Germany rearm. And I said, I always think about that when he says, sir, we're spending more money on defense. I say, ooh, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. But, you know, at least to a certain point. There'll be a point when I'll say, please don't arm anymore if you don't mind. We'll be watching him. I'm kidding.
Mr. President.
Biden, Mr. President.
Yeah, Biden. You said Biden.
Your predecessor dismissed your auto pen investigation. He said he made all the decisions during his presidency. I'm curious your reaction to his dismissal.
Well, look, the auto pen, I think, is the big scandal outside of the rigged election of 2020. I think the biggest scandal of the last many years is the auto pen and who's using it. I happen to think I know, okay, because I'm here. And I'm not a big auto pen person, fortunately. I'm glad. I'm very glad. It's an easy way out. But it's a very bad thing, very dangerous. You know, I sign important documents. Usually when they put documents in front of you, they're important. Even if you're signing ambassadorships and I consider that important. I think it's inappropriate. You have somebody that's devoting 4 years of their life or more to being an ambassador. I think you really that person deserves to get a real signature, not an auto pen signature. And I can tell auto pen easily. I can look at it like two little pinholes from pulling the paper, right? You always see the pinholes. Yeah. It's real easy to tell about auto pen. I think it's very disrespectful to people when they get an auto pen signature. Outside, auto pen to me are used when thousands of letters come in from young people all over the country and you want to get them back. And, you know, people use auto pens for that, to send a little signature at the bottom of a letter. We have thousands of them. We get thousands of letters a week. And it's not possible to, I'd like to do it myself, but you can't do it. To me, that's where auto pens start and stop. But I'm sure that he didn't know many of the things. Look, he was never for open borders. He was never for transgender for everybody. He was never for men playing in women's sports. I mean, he changed, all of these things that changed so radically. I don't think he had any idea that frankly, I said it during the debate and I say it now. He didn't have much of an idea what was going on.
Mr. President,
he shouldn't be. I mean, essentially, whoever used the auto pen was the president. And that is wrong. It's illegal. It's so bad. And it's so disrespectful to our country.
Mr. President, will you leave your troops in Germany? And if I may ask a question to the Chancellor to answer in German for the German audience, how has your first encounter been?
The answer is yes. We'll talk about that. But if they'd like to have them there, we have a lot of them, about 45,000. It's a lot of troops. It's a city when you think of it. That's good economic development. They're highly paid troops, and they spend a lot of money in Germany. But the relationship with Germany is very important. Yeah, we'll be doing that. No problem.
May I say a few words in German to the German public? So, danke für die Frage. Wir sind hier im Weißen Haus und ich bedanke mich beim Präsidenten für den sehr freundlichen Empfang im Oval Office in diesem weltweit bekannten Raum. Ich freue mich sehr, hier zu sein und wir bereiten eine Vertiefung unserer Zusammenarbeit vor.
This is live sound coming from the Oval Office on Bloomberg Radio. The Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, meeting with President Trump today at the White House with a series of events, including lunch, a working lunch, and a bilateral meeting here in the Oval. Let's listen live on Bloomberg.
I understand almost everything and to speak as good as I can.
Very good. It's
Mr. President, you've made
an achievement, actually.
Mr. President, can I follow up on that?
Thank you, Mr. President. The criticism that I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, regarding Elon Musk and your big, beautiful bill. What's your reaction to that? Do you think it in any way hurts passage in the Senate, which is, of course, what is you're seeking?
Well, look, I've always liked Elon, and that's always very surprised. You saw the words he had for me, and he hasn't said anything about me that's bad. I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill, because the bill is incredible. It's the biggest cut in the history of our country. We've never cut. It's about 1.6 trillion in cuts. It's the biggest tax cut. You would say, people's taxes will go way down, but it's the biggest tax cut in history. We are doing things in that bill that are unbelievable. And when you look at what we're doing for small businesses, for people, for middle income people, all of the things that we're doing, nobody's ever seen anything like it. And, Elon's upset because we took the EV mandate and, which was a lot of money for electric vehicles. And, they're having a hard time, the electric vehicles, and they want us to pay billions of dollars in subsidy. And, Elon knew this from the beginning. He knew it for a long time ago. That's been in there. I would say, JD, that hasn't changed. That's been right from the beginning, Mr. Secretary. That hasn't changed at all, right from the beginning. But I know that disturbed him. He wanted, and rightfully, he recommended somebody from that he, I guess, knew very well. I'm sure he respected him, but to run NASA. And I didn't think it was appropriate. And he happened to be a Democrat, like totally Democrat. And I say, look, we won. we get certain privileges, and one of the privileges, we don't have to appoint a Democrat. NASA is very important. We have great people. General Kane is going to be picking somebody with our, we'll be checking him out, seeing, but he wanted that person, a certain person, and we said no. And, you know, I can understand why he's upset. Remember, he was here for a long time. You saw a man who was very happy when he stood behind the Oval desk. And even with the black eye, I said, do you want a little makeup? We'll get you a little makeup. But he said, no, I don't think so, which is interesting and very nice. He wants to be who he is. So you could make that statement too, I guess. Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we will anymore. I was surprised because you were here. Everybody in this room practically was here as we had a wonderful send-off. He said wonderful things about me. You couldn't have nicer. Said the best thing. He's worn the hat. Trump was right about everything. And I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill. We call it a great, big, beautiful bill because that's what it is. And again, biggest tax cuts in history, biggest economic development moves anywhere. We've never done anything like it. Business is spurred. And I don't know if you've seen the numbers, but the numbers came out. Even the CBO, which is run by Democrats, said that we're going to be doing, you know, I'd like you to discuss it, the 2.8 trillion, that CBO. This is a group of people that are Democrats. They're very hostile to us. They just came out with phenomenal numbers, what it does. You want to mention that, Scott?
Yes, sir. So what we've seen is we keep hearing from the CBO that there's going to be a large deficit from the bill, which we disagree with, but using the CBO scoring, they came out and scored the tariff revenue. We think it'll be the minimum of 2.8 trillion over the 10-year window, which actually puts the bill in surplus if you include the tariff revenue, which they won't do.
It gives you a tremendous surplus, but we're not allowed to use that. For some reason, they say scoring. Nobody knows what scoring means. Maybe a couple of people, but nobody. Somebody sits in the background. They say, well, we're not going to allow that. They're not allowing other things that we have that are tremendously profitable for our country. But if you saw the other day, CNBC, they came out with numbers, and the people on the show, very good people, I've watched them for a long time, they couldn't believe the numbers, how good they are. The numbers were incredible. And that was personal income and also very low inflation. We have very low inflation. We're down to 2% now, and maybe even lower than that. And when I took it over, it was a mess. Remember, we had the worst inflation probably in the history of our country. They say 48 years, but let's say I think it's worse than that. So we had the worst inflation in the history of our country under the Biden administration. Now we're down to a beautiful number, 2%. You'd actually like to keep it there. Better than zero is 2%. It's going down maybe to 1%, and 1% is like perfect. That's perfect. You don't want to have zero for certain reasons that nobody is very interested to listen to. But we have almost perfect inflation. Grocery prices are down. Everything. Remember eggs? We weren't going to buy another egg for the next 20 years. It was so expensive, right? Remember? You guys all hit me about eggs. Eggs have come down 400%. Everybody has eggs now. They're having eggs for breakfast again. But if you look at gasoline, very important. I think always the most important because it's the energy is the biggest factor. That's what happened. He screwed up our energy policy and everything went up because energy went up. But now energy is way down, and they have states where you're at $1.98 a gallon for gasoline. So the costs have come way down. And one of the things I ran on was that. I ran on the border. We have the best border in the history of our country, 99.99%. It was last week, 3 people came in, 2 of them for medical reasons. We let them in because one of them had a heart attack. I think it was a nice thing to do. And one of them had something else. So we've never I had very good numbers for 4 years, but we really topped it. And I want to thank Christie and Tom Holman. They've done a fantastic job, but nobody mentions that anymore. Remember, a few months ago, the border was a total disaster. People were coming in by the hundreds of thousands of people a day, a week, a month. I mean, we had a month, 2 million people came in 1 month. The border was being overrun, and a lot of bad people, criminals, murderers. drug dealers. We had some of the worst people in the world coming in from all over the world. It's totally closed. And you know what? People are coming into our country, but they're coming in legally. So we've done a great job. Elon knew that. Elon endorsed me very strongly. He actually went up in campaign for me. I think I would have won. Susie would say I would have won Pennsylvania easily anyway, even if the governor ran, the real governor, not the governor from Minnesota, he's a sick puppy, that guy. That poor guy, I feel sorry for him. But they made a bad choice with him. But if you pick Shapiro or anybody else, I spoke to him recently about his house being set on fire, which was terrible. But if they picked him, I would have won Pennsylvania. I won it by a lot. But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden, he had a problem. And he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate, because that's billions and billions of dollars. And it really is unfair. We want to have cars of all types. Electric, we want to have electric, but we want to have a gasoline, combustion. We want to have different. We want to have hybrids. We want to have we want to be able to sell everything. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, it became a little bit different. And I can understand that. But he knew every aspect of this bill. He knew it better than almost anybody. And he never had a problem until right after he left. And if you saw the statements he made about me, which I'm sure you can get very easily, it's very fresh on tape. He said the most beautiful things about me. And he hasn't said bad about me personally, but I'm sure that'll be next. But I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot.
Mr. President, I just want to clarify, did he raise any of these concerns with you privately before he raised them publicly? And this is the guy you put in charge of cutting spending. Should people not take him seriously about spending now? Are you saying this is all sour grapes?
No, he worked hard and he did a good job. And I'll be honest, I think he misses the place. I think he got out there and all of a sudden he wasn't in this beautiful Oval Office, and he's got nice offices too. But there's something about this one. I was telling the Chancellor, this is where it is. People come in here, even from Germany. They come in and they walk into the Oval Office, and it's just a special place. It's World War I, it started and it ended here, and World War II, and so many other things. Everything big comes right from this beautiful space. It's now much more beautiful than it was 6 months ago. A lot of good things are happening in this room. And I'll tell you, he's not the first. People leave my administration and they love us. And then at some point they miss it so badly. And some of them embrace it and some of them actually become hostile. I don't know what it is. It's sort of Trump derangement syndrome, I guess they call it. But we have it with others too. They leave and they wake up in the morning and the glamour's gone. The whole world is different and they become hostile. I don't know what it is. Someday you'll write a book about it and you'll let us know. Yeah.
Mr. President, speaking of ending wars in this room, you were very critical of Vladimir Putin a couple of days ago. What kind of play is he playing from your perspective? What is it?
Well, look, he got hit. He's been doing hitting, so I understand it. But he got hit hard. And I don't think he's playing games. I think I've always said he wanted the whole thing. I thought he wanted the entire, everything having to do with Ukraine. That's something that would have never happened if I were president. The election was rigged. I didn't get to be president, but I got to be president now. And I think it's a much more important presidency, other than a couple of things like that. The war would have never happened. The war with Ukraine, with Putin, would have never happened, ever, not even a chance. And it didn't happen for 4 years. And it wasn't thought of. I used to talk to him about Ukraine a lot. It was the apple of his eye, but he would have never done what he did. And I think mistakes were made by him, but I think mistakes were made by other people. The president should have never allowed that war. Biden should have never allowed that war to happen. If you had the right guy in here, that war would have never happened. Israel would have never happened with Hamas. That would have never happened. The attack on Israel would have never happened because Iran was broke. They had no money. They had no money to give to Hamas or Hezbollah or anybody else. And all of that would have never happened. Inflation wouldn't have happened. It was caused mostly by energy. And the Biden administration messed up my great energy policy, we were down into the 190 a gallon, and it would have never happened. It was caused by energy and their bad spending on the Green New Scam and other things that they spent on. But all of those things would have never happened. But maybe most importantly, the war, Chancellor, with Russia would never have happened with Ukraine. It was something that would have, you know, I dealt with Putin a lot. There was no chance, zero. And, you know, a lot of people say, how do you know? For 4 years, it didn't happen. There was never a chance of it happening. And he understood the consequences. Now, it's a shame. And when you see all of those people, they came out with a report today that millions of people have died, much more than people thought. And I've been saying that for a long time. The amount of death in that war is far greater than the news has been reporting, or than, frankly, that either side has been reporting. It's a very sad thing. And I can tell you, just speaking for the Chancellor, because we speak about it, he feels the same way. He wants to see it ended. Would you like to say something?
Absolutely. And I'm here, Mr. President, to talk with you later on how we could contribute to that goal. And we all are looking for measures and for instruments to bring this terrible war to an end. And may I remind you that we are having June 6th tomorrow. This is D-Day anniversary, when the Americans once ended a war in Europe. And I think this is in your hand in specific, in ours.
That was not a pleasant day for you?
No, that was not a pleasant.
This was not a great
in the
day.
long run, Mr. President, this was the liberation of my country from Nazi dictatorship.
That's true.
So,
That's true.
and we know what we owe you. But this is the reason why I'm saying that America is again in a very strong position to do something on this war and ending this war. So let's talk about what we can do jointly, and we are ready to do what we can. And you know that we gave support to Ukraine, and that we are looking for more pressure on Russia. The European Union did, and we should talk about that.
We will talk about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's good timing. The numbers for our country are through the roof. The economic.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. The Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It's going to target your heart and your vascular system. It's going to help with your brain function and boost up your metabolism and your energy levels. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Boomer Boost. Take it every day. It's going to help you to lose weight. It's going to help you to have a steady burn of energy throughout the whole day. You'll be able to concentrate better. You'll be able to sleep better. You'll notice the effects of this within 72 hours. It's a great way to get healthy and to control your A1C levels. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Omega-3 will help with cardiovascular health. It helps to prevent red blood cells from overclotting. And omega-3 helps to control your lipid profile. It'll help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. Omega-3 is very important to take, especially if you're age 40 or older. It's important. And stack it with turmeric and ashwagandha. And that's a very powerful stack for cardiovascular health. But also, turmeric and ashwagandha helps with your boosting up that immune system because it's bringing down inflammation. So turmeric soaks up free radicals, brings down pro-inflammatory cytokines, very important. And ashwagandha root will help to control cortisol levels and help to control your blood glucose level. So please go to my store, stack it together. This is a very powerful stack, the turmeric, the ashwagandha, and the omega-3. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And if you want to supercharge it, also stack it with the olive leaf extract.
And it could be on both countries, to be honest. You know, it takes two to tango. But we're going to be very tough. Whether it's Russia or anybody else, we're going to be very tough. That's a bloodbath that's going on over there. And when I see the moment where I say, well, they're going to just keep fighting. You know, I gave the analogy yesterday when I spoke to President Putin. I had a 2-hour and 15-minute call with him. Sometimes and this is me speaking maybe in a negative sense, but sometimes you see two young children fighting like crazy. They hate each other and they're fighting in a park. And you try and pull them apart. They don't want to be pulled. Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while and then pulling them apart. And I gave that analogy to Putin yesterday. I said, President, maybe you're going to have to keep fighting and suffering a lot because both sides are suffering before you pull them apart, before they're able to be pulled apart. But it's a pretty known analogy. You have two kids, they fight. Sometimes you let them fight for a little while. You see it in hockey, you see it in sports. The referees let them go for a couple of seconds, let them go for a little while before you pull them apart. And maybe, and I said it, and maybe that's a negative because we're saying go, but a lot of bad blood. There's some bad blood between the two. I have to deal with it, and the chancellor has to deal with it. It's incredible. The level of, there's a great hatred between those two men, but between the warring parties, great hatred.
What made you say and believe apparently that there's no immediate peace?
What?
That there's no immediate peace, there will be no.
Well, I can't. I'd love to have immediate if I could. But we don't have immediate, you know. It's like, I'd love to have that. I'd like it to start. Right now, we would leave a room. If we knew the war could end, we'd say, forget about you guys, forget about trade, right?
Yeah.
We'd say, let's go settle it. There's some additional fighting that's going to go on. You know, he attacked and they attacked pretty harshly. They went deep into Russia. And he actually told me, I mean, I made it very clear. He said, we have no choice but to attack based on that. And it's probably not going to be pretty. I don't like it. I said, don't do it. You shouldn't do it. You should stop it. But again, there's a lot of hatred. And, you know, I'm very proud of the fact that with India and Pakistan, I was able to stop that. And those are nuclear powers. And that was getting close to being out of hand. And I spoke to some very talented people on both sides, very good people on both sides. And I said, you know, we're dealing with you on trade, Pakistan and India right now. I said, we're not going to deal with you on trade if you're going to go shooting each other and whipping out nuclear weapons that maybe even affect us. Because, you know, that nuclear dust blows across oceans very quickly. It affects us. And I said, if you're going to do that, we're not going to do any trade deals. And you know what? I got that war stopped. Now, I hope we don't go back and we find out that they started, but I don't think they will. They were both good. They were well represented. I want to congratulate both countries because, as you know, the leader of India, who's a great guy, was here a few weeks ago. We had some great talks. We're doing a trade deal. And Pakistan, likewise, they have very, very strong leadership. Some people won't like when I say that, but, you know, it is what it is. And they stopped that war. Now, am I going to get credit? I'll never get credit for anything. They don't give me credit for anything, but nobody else could have done it. I stopped it. I was very proud of that. I wish we could do the same thing with Ukraine and Russia. And at some point it'll happen. I believe that. And if it doesn't happen, or if I see somebody's out of line, if Russia's out of line, you'll be amazed how tough. Remember this. They like to say that I'm friends with Russia. I'm not friends with anybody. I'm friends with you. I'm not friends with it. I want the right thing to happen for our country, for everybody, for humanity. But I'm the one that stopped the pipeline. It's called Nord Stream 2. Until I came along, nobody ever heard, not one person in this room ever heard of Nord Stream 2. You probably did, yes, because it went to Germany. He's the only one.
Knowing that this was a mistake.
But I stopped it. I stopped it. Yeah, and you've said that openly. Yeah. It was a mistake because, and I used to go with Angela. I say, well, wait a minute. We're spending all this money to defend you against Russia, and then you're giving Russia billions of dollars a month. What kind of a deal is that? You know, which was, but you said it better than anybody else. I appreciate it. But I'm the one that stopped it. And that was the biggest economic development job, if you want to call it that, in the history, think of it, in the history of Russia. That was a massive, it's the biggest pipeline in the world. Going to go all over Europe, not only to Germany. You know, they were Germany, but then they were branching off all over to Europe. Nobody ever heard of, not one person of you heard of it. And I stopped it. It was dead. And then they say, I'm friends with Putin. I got along with him. He respected me, I respected him. It would have never happened. But I stopped Nord Stream 2. When Biden came in, almost the first week, he approved it. He let it be built. And then they say that I wasn't tough on Russia. Putin said to me, you know, you're not tough on Russia. You stopped the biggest, most important job we've ever done. You stopped it. And Biden came in and he let it be built. And I'll tell you what, I'll never forget the day I had it totally stopped. They weren't building. They gave up on it. They weren't able to. And then Biden came in and he let him build. I couldn't believe it. Okay, one or two questions more, please. Any questions? Any question for the Chancellor? Go ahead, for the Chancellor. I like his answers much better.
Will you continue to support Ukraine?
Yeah, I'm with Ukraine. We just signed a big deal on rare earth with Ukraine. And I want to, you know what, I'm for stopping killing, really. That's what I'm for. Again, a war that would have never started, should have never started. I want to see the killing stop. We spent $350 billion, much more than Europe, but Europe spent a lot also. And they spent way over $100 billion.
Yeah.
So you're talking about close to $500 billion went into that whole thing. And it's not even the money. And I know with you too, it's a lot of money, but it's the death that's being caused. We went to the Middle East. I went last week to the Middle East. We took in $5.1 trillion. That's many, many times. That's 30, 40 times, 50 times more than what we're talking about. It's think of that, $5.1 trillion of investment with one trip that lasted 4 days. So it's not the money. It's a little bit of money, but not the money, the big thing. The big thing is the death. The death of, and really the decimation. You've lost a whole culture. You know, Ukraine had the most beautiful turrets. They call them turrets, the little towers, beautiful towers, the most beautiful in the world. They're all now laying on their side, blown to smithereens. It'll never happen again. They've taken away the culture of a country.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. This collagen is a powder. You take it every day. It's going to help with your skin, your hair, your nails, musculature, your joints, your cartilage, and your bones. Take it every day. This is a month's supply. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even milk. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Also, take the resveratrol. Resveratrol is very important. It's an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals, help with the mitochondrial health, boost up those energy levels. It's going to help with youthful gene expression and help to get rid of cells that are in senescence. I've been taking resveratrol for decades. Stack it with C60, ubiquinol, and NAD+. And vitamin C and magnesium, really important. It's dual purpose. It's actually not dual, it's multi-purpose. It'll help with your skin. It'll help to boost up your immune system, and it'll help with your brain function, because the magnesium, taking magnesium, it has been found that brain function improves. Very important. So take the vitamin C and magnesium, drink it with filtered water. And having a good sleep continuously, consistently, is very important. Getting into 3 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep will help to detoxify your body. You'll be well rested in the morning, and you're going to help to consolidate memory. So take the Good Night formula every night. It has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. By doing that, you're going to improve your memory, detoxify your body, and you're going to be well rested. It has been found that chronic sleep deprivation, it can be immunosuppressive. It can cause problems with memory and potentially early onset of dementia. So it's very important to get a good night's sleep. All right. So let's go back to Bloomberg and the Oval Office.
I like to look at them, right?
It's terrible.
So
it's really
bodies, arms, heads, legs, all over the place. You've never seen anything like it. It's so ridiculous.
And this is only by Russian weapons against Ukraine. This had never happened with Ukraine weapons against Russia. Never. Ukraine is only targeting military targets, not civilians, not private, not energy infrastructure. So this is the difference, and that's the reason why we are trying to do more on Russia, how to stop this war.
Well, in this case, I'm talking about the battlefield, you know, the soldiers on soldiers. But you could also say that too with the cities.
Yep.
You know, the cities are being hit also. So it's a terrible, terrible thing. Somebody said AutoPen. Did I hear the word AutoPen?
I'm just curious.
Because I think it's the biggest scandal maybe in the last 100 years in this country. So when I hear that word, I think it has to be discussed because the fake news will try and, you know, hide it, and we can't do that.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Have you uncovered any evidence that anything specific was signed without President Biden's knowledge or by other people in the administration acting illegally?
Well, I don't think Biden would know whether or not he signed it.
I'm asking if you've uncovered any of that information.
No, but I've uncovered, you know, the human mind. I was in a debate with the human mind, and I didn't think he knew what the hell he was doing. So, you know, it's just one of those things, one of those problems. We can't ever allow that to happen to our country. The danger our country was in, and I know some of the people that worked with him, radical left, horrible people. And I could give you the name of some of the people that use the AutoPen because I'm here. And I ask questions about people that were here also. There are a lot of people that were here when that happened, and they're here right now, and they'll answer your question very accurately. But I know some of the people that use that AutoPen, and those are not the people that had the same ideology as Joe Biden. These were radical left lunatics that used that, and they didn't get elected. He didn't get elected either, actually. Thank you very much, everybody.
Roughly 45 minutes in the.
I'll tell you, we will never see a president like that ever again. So just enjoy the ride.
You're always able to watch us on YouTube, live from Washington by searching Bloomberg Business News Live. Quite the romp there. We covered a lot of ground. To quickly, if you're just joining us, just stop down on some of what we heard. Big questions about whether the president would speak to the objections, passionate objections from Elon Musk when it comes to the reconciliation bill. One of the first things that came up, President Trump saying, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we will anymore. I was surprised. He said that Elon was upset about the EV mandate, something that we've heard quite a bit about here. In fact, a story on the terminal that we've crunched numbers on this, as a matter of fact, with Tesla, according to JP Morgan, facing $1.2 billion of risk in this Trump tax bill. President Trump saying that Elon hasn't said a bad thing about me personally, but I'm sure that'll be next. I'm very disappointed in Elon. Only moments later, Elon Musk takes to Twitter writing, whatever. Keep the EV solar incentive cuts in the bill, even though no oil and gas subsidies are touched. He goes on to say, either you get a big and ugly bill or a slim and beautiful bill. Slim and beautiful is the way. Ukraine, of course, looming large in this conversation with the Chancellor of Germany on Vladimir Putin. President Trump saying he got hit, referring to Ukraine's mission to go deep into Russia last weekend. He says he's been doing hitting, so I understand it, but he got hit hard. I don't think he's playing games, knowing that a retaliation is coming, as President Trump wrote on Truth Social yesterday. He likened them to kids in a schoolyard, Ukraine and Russia, knowing, of course, that Ukraine was invaded by Russia, saying sometimes you see the two kids fighting like crazy. Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while. He got into the CBO, Congressional Budget Office scoring of the reconciliation bill, saying everyone says scoring. No one knows what scoring means. When it came to gas prices, he said we have states where gas is $1.98 a gallon. We have no evidence that that is the case in any of the 50 states. And then, of course, a deep dive on the AutoPen, saying it's the big scandal of the last many years, remembering that Donald Trump last evening announced an investigation from the office into what happened in the prior administration, the use of the AutoPen, and what he describes as a cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline. That's what we have for you today at the White House. That meeting in the Oval will now move into a lunch with the Chancellor of Germany, and we'll keep tabs on any other headlines that we get from the White House. We want to bring you into an important conversation right now on Bloomberg with the mayor of San Francisco, Daniel Lurie, sitting down with Bloomberg Business Week editor Brad Stone. Let's put an ear on this conversation live on Bloomberg.
Yeah, so those are two good examples. Private-public partnership is always needed. Every city does this. This is not something new. It's just
please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the gel that I have. I have it in the tube form and in the quick dispenser. Have some at work, have some at home. You never know when you need it. It's dual purpose. You can use it as a skincare every day. You can put it on a cut and help to heal it. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your eyes, around your ears. Lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. You can use it as an aftershave. Please go to my store and get the gels. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Clarity Factor helps to get rid of that brain fog, and it also helps to support your memory. If you need to concentrate at work or at home, or even if you're retired, just concentrating on tasks, taking Clarity Factor is going to help you. And getting those neurons firing on a continuous basis and you being able to think clearly, you're going to be able to build neuroplasticity, positive neuroplasticity. That's really important for memory, and that's important just for overall neural function. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take the Clarity Factor. Extremely important. It stacks really well with NAD+, ubiquinol, C60, resveratrol. Make sure you drink filtered water. And Myotrol. If you're 40 years of age or older, you should be taking Myotrol. Myotrol helps with gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. When you get older, you start to atrophy. And when you atrophy, you're losing muscle, you're losing bone density, and you need to reverse that course, or you're going to have problems in your geriatric years. So do resistance training, take Myotrol, do that every day, and you're going to be able to build muscle and reduce the effects of just overall aging and the atrophy of your musculature. In addition, taking Myotrol with Gladiator barley, you'll get an additional strength benefit in building muscle. So it's very important. Take it every day. Very, 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 very important. Okay. Now, we were talking about Gladiator barley. Now, Gladiator barley is a powder. It's a high-density protein. You get a big scooper. This is a month's supply. Take it every day. Mix it with soft foods like how I do it. Or you can mix it with milk or just with filtered water or even in a smoothie, but take it every day. But what this will do is help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals with superoxide dismutase, and it will help you to build muscle. It stacks really well with Myotrol. Do resistance training. You'll gain muscle, you'll recover quicker because it's going to reduce inflammation, and it's going to soak up those free radicals. And you're detoxifying your body too. It's a huge benefit by taking Gladiator barley and building up muscle. But not just that, it stacks well with Myotrol and Boomer Boost. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. So let's go to another video here. Want to cover some of the other stuff like Times Radio here. Wait. Let's play MSNBC here.
With the help of Zero accounting software, I've got the right information at my fingertips.
So business is a breeze. And I've got bigger plans. Search Zero with an X.
Welcome back. A stark new warning from Russia's Vladimir Putin issued via President Trump. In a social media post, President Trump says he spoke with Putin for more than an hour yesterday, and that Putin vowed strong retaliation for the stunning Ukrainian drone assault across multiple locations deep inside Russia this week. New footage released by the Ukrainian Security Service shows more of that attack that devastated some aircraft of Russia's bomber fleet, a surprise assault a whole year and a half in the making. Let's go to NBC's chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons, for the very latest. Keir, where does Putin's retaliation threats leave potential peace negotiations?
Well, that's a great question, and much of it depends on what's in the mind of not President Putin, but President Trump. The political site, Axios, citing sources who discussed it with him, say President Trump called those Ukrainian drone strikes badass and strong, but is concerned that those strikes will make a ceasefire harder. So the war continues. And so does a propaganda battle, with Ukraine releasing more details of that attack on Russian bombers, while Russia claiming, clearly falsely from the images, that all the planes can be repaired. President Trump and President Putin offering their first public reaction as new video emerges of Ukraine's drone attack that devastated some of Russia's deadly long-range bomber fleet. The more than 4 minutes of footage released by the Ukrainian security service shows additional Russian aircraft targeted, including what appears to be an A-50 spy plane. After an hour and 15-minute phone call between the two men, Trump saying Putin told him, quote, very strongly, Russia will have to respond. Moscow has launched an onslaught of air attacks in recent weeks. This latest video, the aftermath of a Russian drone and missile attack on Kharkiv in just the last 24 hours. Trump did not say whether he tried to persuade Putin against another deadly offensive. Despite close to 1 million Russian military casualties, 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers, according to a new report, and President Trump's long-standing conviction that Putin was ready to end the war.
I believe Putin wants to do it. And if I thought that President Putin did not want to get this over with, I wouldn't even be talking about it.
Trump said his call with the Russian leader was not a conversation that will immediately lead to peace. That impasse did not prevent them from discussing cooperation on other issues, like Iran nuclear negotiations. Iran's close relations with Russia, along with China and North Korea, has been dubbed an axis of resistance. President Zelensky warning Putin feels impunity and that Russia is, quote, giving the finger to the entire world.
We just have to pressure on him, and maybe we will get peace.
President Zelensky handing out medals. His message, Ukraine can keep fighting. And now back to that drone strike, top Ukrainian officials insisting that 41 Russian aircraft were destroyed or damaged. So far, visual evidence is not available to confirm that number. The Russian spy plane that you saw there, for example, in the footage, you don't actually see it on fire, but there is other footage which shows Ukraine targeting Russian planes that at that moment are loaded with bombs. Anna.
Right, Keir Simmons, thank you. Joining us now is Igor Novikov. He's in Kyiv. He's former advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Igor, it's good to have you with us. Ceasefire negotiations seem to be at a standstill right now. Russia's already stepped up its bombardment of Ukrainian cities, vowing further retaliation after that massive attack. What are the Ukrainian people bracing for to happen next?
Well, I'm pretty sure nothing we haven't seen before, on one hand. On the other hand, obviously, Putin is a bit angry about what happened in the Operation Spiderweb. And unfortunately, that's the only thing we can do. We need to make sure that the cost of this war for Putin is unbearable. And since we don't have as much support as we had from the West, we have to basically use the asymmetrical war tactic.
I mean, it was like something out of a spy thriller, that Operation Spiderweb. How big of a morale boost was that for Ukraine? And I guess conversely, are you worried about setbacks when it comes to reaching a ceasefire?
Well, I don't believe in ceasefire until autumn, to be honest, because Putin is not interested in that. In the conventional warfare, he does have advantage at the moment, hence our asymmetrical attacks. Plus, I don't think President Trump is really helping, because if you analyze what he said, he basically said the operation was badass, so continue doing that. Putin's going to strike in retaliation. Well, nothing I can do about it, but guys, I want peace. I mean, that doesn't work like that.
So we know President Trump and Putin spoke for more than an hour, but President Trump didn't say whether he tried to persuade Putin from retaliating. What do you make of the U.S. involvement at this point?
Well, it's absolutely horrific. I mean, that statement I saw from him on Truth Social, because basically what he's saying is, you know, a dictator just said, I'm going to murder a bunch of civilians, because if anyone's got any doubts, he's going to attack civilians rather than the military targets. You just wait and see. And the president of the United States, you know, the leader of the free world, just said, well, you know, he just told me that I didn't say anything in return.
Igor Novikov, thanks so much.
Or you will. Yeah.
Thank you for giving us this pulse check from Ukraine and for continuing to provide that insight. We appreciate you.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. You take this the exact same way that you would take the gladiator barley, but the heirloom barley focuses on detoxification of your body, bringing down inflammation, and soaking up free radicals with superoxide dismutase. It's a high-density protein. You take a scooper a day or a half a scooper. This is a month's supply. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even milk, but take it every day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And let's talk about the first pillar of my protocol here. So I call it the core, all right? And with the core protocol, the first pillar is to help boost up your immune system by taking the max 14, max 35, and the cleanse. Second pillar is C60 to soak up free radicals. The third pillar is the turmeric, the ashwagandha, and the lignans to boost up the immune system. And the fourth pillar is the boomer boost to boost up your energy levels and your metabolism. You can stack on top of that or customize whatever you're looking for in terms of your supplement stack. But with max 14, max 35, or a cleanse, take a teaspoon a day. So you take, you can take the max 14 or the 35 in the cleanse, all right? Right? You can just take one of them, take a teaspoon a day, and it will help to improve your oral cavity, your oral pharynx, the mucosal barrier, your epithelial lining, and help to boost up that immune system. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. And it's really simple. Just swish it in your mouth, gargle 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then swallow it. It's very simple, right? If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two, and then go back to your maintenance dose. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the max 14 or the max 35 or the cleanse. Cleanse is 30 parts per million, 30 ppms. 14, max 14 is 14 parts per million, and the max 35 is 35 parts per million. They're at different price points, based on your affordability. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. All right. Let's listen to Times Radio because I'm not sure, my understanding was the drone attack really decimated his air capability.
The Ukrainian agents were able to assemble their drones there, put them into the false roofs of these log cabins and deploy them across the country using unsuspecting truck drivers. The audacity to do this right under the noses of Putin's FSB is really quite incredible.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. And this time we're joined by Maxim Tucker. Maxim is the Times' Ukraine correspondent. He's been reporting from the front lines in Ukraine since 2022. Maxim, you're just back. I'll ask you about that trip in a moment. But I want to start off by this President Putin taking a couple of days to break his silence over this daring mass Ukrainian drone attacks on multiple airfields in Russia. Donald Trump's account was he had a phone call with Putin, and that was the first we heard of any kind of response where he's threatening retaliation. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's astonishing. It's almost a week now since these attacks. A huge blow struck to Russia's nuclear-capable long-range missile carriers, and no response from Putin himself to this. Apart from what we hear from Donald Trump. I mean, this is, I think, classic Putin when he is confronted with a difficult situation, a difficult decision, and he doesn't know what to do. He stumbles a little bit and he doesn't respond. So we haven't heard from him. He's pledged apparently to Trump retaliation, but clearly he doesn't still know what kind of retaliation he can bring. I mean, Russia is already attacking Ukraine pretty much to the maximum of its capabilities. It's sending hundreds of drones now. It's been sending a lot of cruise missiles into Ukraine. This obviously limits the amount of missile carriers that Russia Russia has, that Russia can send against Ukraine. Russia is already using chemical weapons in many areas of the front to try and dislodge Ukrainian troops. So what's he got left? I mean, a nuclear response, but obviously that's going to be intolerable even by Donald Trump, I would have thought.
On those attacks, those daring drone attacks that hit all the news since the weekend, you've been looking into the planning of it, which was 18 months, we understand, and you've been in contact with the SBU, Ukraine's SBU, since finding out more about it. What more have you learned about that operation?
I think one of the astonishing things about this operation is carried out right under the noses of President Putin's FSB security services, from a warehouse in Chelyabinsk, maybe 2 miles away from the FSB office, and that's one of Russia's largest cities near the border with Kazakhstan. The Ukrainian agents were able to assemble their drones there, put them into the false roofs of these log cabins and deploy them across the country using unsuspecting truck drivers. The audacity to do this right under the noses of Putin's FSB is really quite incredible.
And what are the SBUs saying to you about it? They're clearly wanting to push this and keep it in the media attention.
It's a huge success for them at a time when morale has been very difficult in Ukraine. There have been concerted Russian attacks, the largest 3 in a row Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities over a couple of weekends ago. And people are starting to wonder when this war will end. They're not getting additional support from the US. And how will this war end without the support from Western partners it has been relying on? So a commission like this, which shows that Ukraine can rely on its own ingenuity and its own technology to deal a kind of asymmetric blow to Russia's incredibly powerful nuclear-capable bombers, has really lifted the mood around Kiev. And it was astonishing, how many people were talking about this when I was still there. Ordinary people were getting this news in their channel, in their feeds. And celebrating it, actually, because these are the bombers that are night after night delivering cruise missiles that keep them awake, that keep them in the basements, keep them worried for their lives, and they're worried for the lives of their children. So people are very happy to see Russia attacked in this way, and also very happy that it didn't have to rely necessarily on any Western equipment to do it. And it shows that Ukraine has opportunities and abilities to strike Russia where it hurts, even if it's not getting Western support.
You say you were there when this news came through. Were you there long enough to get any sense of what difference it has made to those aerial bombardments that have been so incessant?
Well, I think, it's been quite cloudy and rainy in Kiev, so it's always difficult to interpret what's causing delays in attacks. I mean, most recently, there have been a lot more drone attacks than missile attacks, the hundreds and hundreds of these Shahed drones launched against Ukrainian cities. And that's because the Russians are able to mass produce these and relatively cheap, whereas the missiles are obviously more expensive, more complicated, and they rely on components which are subject to sanctions and are more difficult to bring into the country as a result of that. I think, the number of cruise missile strikes will kind of remain. It's only been a week, and Russia kind of tends to launch these big cruise missile strikes every week or so we don't know exactly how it's impacted them. But certainly they're not going to be able to put as many aircraft into the air as before, that, they're going to have to rotate the same aircraft more frequently. There's wear and tear on these aircraft. Some of these aircraft are probably going to have to be cannibalized to replace damaged parts on other aircraft. It will have an impact, but it remains to be seen exactly how much it will affect the amount of missiles that Russia can now launch into Ukraine.
And on your latest trip, Maxim, you found out about the way that radio electronic warfare is being developed and adapted to deal with the unmanned aerial vehicle systems. Can you tell me about the work and what you learned about the work of the specialized school you went to and what it does exactly?
So 6 years ago, these were farmers and truck drivers, and now they're having to learn how to save their lives and save the lives of their comrades by mastering radio electronic warfare. This is something that the captain had spent 6 years learning himself, and had to try and impart this in 24 days. And he said it was particularly difficult because people were selected for these courses almost at random. He told me a story about how one soldier had been selected to attend the class based on the fact that he had knocked a Russian drone after a tree with a long stick and presented it to his commander after it didn't explode. And the commander said, "Oh, right, you're going to be our drone expert," and off you go to learn about radio electronic warfare. So warfare and the technology involved in it has so rapidly advanced, it's way ahead of what people can now learn in the classroom. And that's one of the reasons why AI, I think, is increasingly becoming important on the battlefield.
I found it really interesting in your dispatch, though, to find the kind of ways that these people who are using electronic warfare are trying to deceive the drone operators, the Russian drone operators, into missing their targets or thinking that their drone is still up in the air. How are they doing that exactly?
So there were some fascinating methods that they have. They've got these devices now which can intercept the data being transmitted back to Russian drone operators. And they would use that. Initially, they said that they used these the interceptions to transmit porn back to the operators so that they would be distracted. And then they realized they could actually record these flights and send the drone operators at previous versions of their flight routes so that the drone operators would think that they're still flying one of their routes to attack a target. And meanwhile, they would be triangulating the position of the drone operator and attacking them. So using the broadcast of a previous flight so that the Russian drone operator would not know that he'd already been intercepted and targeted by the Ukrainians. And it's fascinating, the kind of things that these technology enables them to do and how rapidly it's advancing.
And this specialized school is the last testing ground before the front line. Did you get a sense of what works and what doesn't and why?
So they've got like a good set of equipment. They had a plan to use what they call a Mirage system to build a radio electronic wall across the front line, which would detect these drones based on their radio signals. It can detect them because they're too small to be detected by radar usually. And it can use either a kind of conventional jammer to block the signal, the radio signal, or it could guide a kind of automated turret to shoot them down. Now, the problem with this is that almost as quickly as this technology is developed, more technology is developed, and Russia's obviously now got these fiber optic drones, and fiber optic drones are not emitting a radio signal and cannot be jammed in the same way, so they have to have some kind of physical means of destruction. Now, they're still the minority. There are not so many fiber optic drones on the battlefield as there are radio drones. But, as the war goes on, as these devices that intercept and jam signals are going to become more successful, we can expect to see more fiber optics and then a countermeasure to the fiber optics, presumably.
Is this school then already working on the next line of defense?
So the school is really working what it's have, and it's trying to take lessons back to the manufacturers and the developers to see what are the things that work and what are the things that don't work. It's a testing ground for pilots as well. There are drone pilots learning their craft there. So it's vital for feeding back information to the manufacturers. But the driving force of this is actually, it's not being done necessarily on the front line, but it's really being done in the tech hubs of Ukraine, where there are software engineers coming together from across the country and often in rival companies, but working together to try and formulate solutions to the latest battlefield problems. And they are a huge advantage to Western military tech companies now, because they are able to go to the battlefield, learn from the soldiers, take those lessons back, test their products, and then bring them back and also produce them at scale for relatively a cheap amount, because the Ukrainians are needing to use so many of them in the battle against Russia.
And what is absolutely extraordinary is amidst these kind of gargantuan efforts that you describe for Ukraine to defend its scale in a struggle for its own survival, you've got these kind of domestic political fights going on. And one of your articles was about the intense rivalry between President Zelensky and the former world champion heavyweight boxer, now mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko. How did that rivalry start exactly?
So I think this rivalry stems back. It was a small scale then, but in 2019, Zelensky had hoped to ally with Klitschko in Kiev to win local elections and have a coalition in Kiev. And Klitschko then chose to instead align with Poroshenko, who was Zelensky's arch rival. And I think Zelensky never really forgiven him for that. Now, Klitschko, obviously, he has his own presidential ambitions. He tried to run in 2014 and probably sees himself as a potential successor to Zelensky. And I think that kind of political feud has been bubbling away at the surface. What Zelensky's done since the war started is to appoint military administrations in many of the major cities across the country. And those powers mirror some of the powers that local mayors have. And Zelensky has been accused of consolidating his power at the expense of elected mayors and elected councils in different countries. Now, here's an argument to say you need to do that because it's wartime and you need to make sure there are enough shelters and there are enough defenses and fortifications in these cities. And Klitschko has been accused of corruption. There have been arrests of close members of his team who seem to have been actually caught red-handed. And we spoke to several independent experts who said that these are legitimate corruption arrests. And none of it directly ties to Klitschko, but when you have 10 arrests of your subordinates, it does point to being very laissez-faire at the very least about corruption under your watch. Now, Klitschko has responded to that quite angrily, saying he told me that this the Ukraine now reeks of authoritarianism, and he thought that Zelensky had been
behind this whole story. The Ukraine now reeks of authoritarianism, and he thought that Zelensky had been going too far in taking up power from locally elected mayors. Ironically, that no matter what the truth is behind this whole story, those kind of pronouncements about Zelensky would be welcomed by someone like President Putin. He's only looking for excuses to knock the leadership of Ukraine at the moment and sow division.
Yes, that's exactly the kind of narrative that Putin will be happy to see, and that Putin has been trying to spread across Ukraine's allies. So that kind of division is something that will be welcomed in Russia. You can see why Klitschko is doing it, because there is this huge battle playing out for control of Kiev's resources and funding at the moment. And there are big questions about the priorities in the country, because there's a lot of construction work still going up at the same time as fortifications and trench lines need to be built in the east of the country.
So what kind of things are we talking about? What kind of examples have you got of the kind of disparity between where the money's being spent and where people feel it should be being spent?
So one thing that Ukrainians in Kiev have told me repeatedly is how frustrated they are at the traffic jams across the country, and that a metro line that Klitschko promised in 2017 has failed to materialize, that the metro, even though it's underground, shuts down during air raids, and you only have these really awful little yellow buses which run across the city, belching diesel fumes everywhere, and they run in exchange for cash. It's a cash-only business. And city councillors accuse Klitschko of being linked to this, what they're called the Marshutka mafia, and taking cash payments that don't pay taxes, don't contribute to the economy in any way, and benefiting from that.
He clearly denies that.
He denies that, of course. He said that those are lies and manipulations spread by the office of the president in order to smear his reputation. He was very strong on his rebuttal to that. But it demonstrates this struggle for power that's going on. Zelensky's appointed kind of rival mayor, Timur Tkachenko, is now appointing different heads of different districts in Kiev, and that's very much taking away some of Klitschko's powers, and he'd be very cross about that.
How much did you get a sense that the longer the war actually goes on, the more difficult it is to keep these kind of rivalries and these political feuds at bay in the interests of pulling together in a war effort?
It's very difficult. I mean, obviously, during the kind of Russian airstrikes that you have at the moment, there is just no feasible way of holding elections, at least in the manner that they used to hold elections in Ukraine. So there is no way that dissenting voices can be represented at the ballot box. And now obviously we had 3 years of war, so people might be dissatisfied with Zelensky, they might be dissatisfied with Klitschko, but nobody can have even local elections to express that dissatisfaction. And so you're going to see this kind of frustrations bubbling to the fore more and more often, I think. It shows how important it is for Ukraine to think about a way to allow these voices to express themselves without creating huge disunity in the country and without causing and ending up in large-scale protests, which is the real big risk here, is that if people aren't able to hold elections and express their dissent, then they will take it to the streets as they have previously done in Ukraine, and that could have disastrous consequences.
You are a regular visitor to Ukraine for your reporting trips. Can you tell me what your impressions were on this particular visit? How have you seen the country change?
So I think it's always remarkable how resilient Ukraine is and how people manage to go about their business even if no one slept all night, because they've been under air raids and you can hear explosions in the streets outside when you're trying to sleep from midnight till 6 in the morning. people don't press, but they carry on and they get up as if nothing's happened. And it is astonishing how people do that. I think the mood has soured in recent weeks, with the election of Trump and the kind of expectation that at some point, surely Trump is going to see that Putin is playing him. And still he says 2 weeks, I'm giving Putin another 2 weeks to show he's serious about peace. There is frustration and there's worry that without these Western weapons that Ukraine will not be able to hold the line and that there is a greater threat. There's obviously the problems with mobilizations where men are scared to go outside because they're worried that they might be conscripted if they go to a restaurant or if they go to the gym or something, they'll be picked up by recruitment officers. These are real fears, but I think that's why it was so important that we had at the end of last week this Operation Spiderweb, because it suddenly gave people a feeling of hope and possibility and a feeling that some kind of victories can be scored against the Russians. And I think that's really, really important for morale in Ukraine, particularly at this point in the war when you see so many hundreds of drones being sent against Ukrainian cities every night. And that has a huge impact on the morale of the civilian population.
We started at the beginning talking about these very dramatic aerial drone attacks on multiple airfields in Russia. I'm just wondering whether you think, in the context of things, this is a one-off because it was so long in the planning and so spectacular in its results, or do you think there is going to be a follow-up and this is part of a concerted campaign?
I think there definitely will be follow-ups. I think the technology is changing and Ukraine will be able to do this in different ways. So maybe 18 months ago, when you were planning this operation, you thought we need to drive trucks into Ukraine and they will deliver these short-range drones a few kilometers into Russian air bases. Now you have completely autonomous drones. I was talking to a developer today that was talking about drones that they train it on a target. Say you can give it an aeroplane, a video of an aeroplane, train their AI targeting software on that, and then just send it 130 kilometers to try and find this target. You probably have some intelligence giving you coordinates where you think it's located. It will recognize by itself the route that it's taking through landmarks. You can teach it to dodge different countermeasures. So the way that the war will be fought is not necessarily drones delivered by trucks, but drones delivered over increasingly long distances, which aren't limited by the radio horizon or jamming or anything that is currently affecting drone warfare. But they will just be programmed and sent to do a job, and they will carry that out. It will be very difficult. The only way that you'll be able to stop them is to shoot them down. And these are very small devices with only a few kilograms of explosive. But obviously, when they hit the right spot, precision spot on a major target, that we've seen the damage that can have. So I think that both sides will be doing this. There are the long-range drones that already go thousands of kilometers. They can also be programmed differently in future. These kind of operations will continue, but they might look a little bit different, but they'll still be as devastating a consequence, I think.
Maxim Tucker, great to speak to you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60, the extra virgin olive oil version, or the MCT coconut oil C60, or the avocado C60. By taking a teaspoon a day, you're going to soak up free radicals, you're going to help the mitochondrial health, you're going to increase your ATP, you're going to have less stress in the cell. And when the cell is performing properly and your tissues are performing properly, your organ systems and your glands and your endocrine system and your immune system and your neurons will perform properly. See, the key here is to soak up free radicals and reduce the stress on the cell and on the mitochondria. And that way you're increasing energy levels and you're increasing the efficiency of the cellular processes. Now, C60 is very potent. It's going to soak up hundreds, if not 1,000 times more free radicals than 1 molecule of vitamin C. And C60, what you'll notice is that over time, you're actually visibly seeing your body age slower. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach for best absorption. If you work out, take it before your workout. It'll soak up the free radicals while you're working out. and you'll recover quicker. But take it every day, take a teaspoon a day. I've been taking this since 2016. All right. And it's a major part of my core protocol. It's the second pillar to soak up free radicals. The first pillar is to take the max 14 or max 35 or cleanse and boost up that immune system. C60 is going to help with soaking up free radicals. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans, boosts up that immune system. And the fourth pillar is the boomer boost. It's going to boost up those energy levels and rev up your metabolism. But C60 taking regularly is going to reduce stress in your cells, soak up those free radicals, and it'll also soak up free radicals in your bloodstream. And by soaking up free radicals in your bloodstream, you're reducing oxidized LDL. When you reduce the amount of oxidized LDL, you're reducing plaque formation. That's why it helps with the cardiovascular system. And for your neurons, it helps by reducing stress in the neuron and also soaking up the free radicals in the neuron. And by doing that, you're going to have healthy mitochondria. You need lots of mitochondria producing ATP so you can produce neurotransmitters so your neurons function properly. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take the C60. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And lastly, get the drops and the lozenges. Very important. Whenever you have that irritation in your throat, take it right away, either at home or at work. Just be prepared. I have 3 flavors for the drops. You get 100 in each bag. The blueberry, the drops are smaller than the lozenges. You can also get it in cherry and in honey and lemon. By being prepared, you mitigate any issue that you may have. I also have lozenges in stock. It's elderberry zinc. You get 21 in each bag. Get a few bags for your household. Be prepared. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. That's my broadcast for today. The S&P 500 is trading at 5,964. VIX is trading at 1757. Tomorrow is going to be a big data day. So be prepared. There's going to be a lot of movement, I think, in the market tomorrow. So see you tomorrow. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.